We use AI extensively. Increasing the model capabilities has been fantastic. I don't know where it's going to go, but in the last generation, I think it's been improving, but not as much of an improvement as I would have anticipated. And now my buying decision is actually different. What's making my purchasing decision? I think it's important to learn what your customer or that business or vertical is doing with the data. Especially lately, there seems to be a propensity for people to go, well, we want to collect all the data and we're going to make money from it. And they don't really have an idea what they actually want to do. Understanding someone's business is the most important thing. And then apply your, maybe not rigorously, but apply your common techniques to that. And you've got to be careful with that because technology is advancing so quickly. What you did last year is maybe not even valid anymore.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Leaders Series. We have Barrett Abernethy today. He is a data consultant, a leader in AI thinking, and runs a business called Bronto Farm, which is a leader in data storage. Today, the conversation is really around how a fast-moving technological environment is changing the way Barrett works, the type of people or bots that he's working with, and the way his leadership has progressed over many years until I would class him as a pioneer within this space. And I think you'll really be interested in listening to what Barrett has to say and hopefully learning from what he has to say as well. So without further ado, here's Barrett. Barrett, hi, how are you?
Hi, David. Yeah, well, thanks. And yourself?
I'm really well today, thank you. Yes. We're recording this in the run-up to Christmas, so I don't think it will go live. But this is definitely the nearest Christmas recording that I'm doing. So I'm starting to feel festive.
I feel honoured, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So it's good, and it's starting to feel festive in the house with the Christmas tree and that sort of stuff. So I'm in a good mood today, so yeah.
Wonderful.
Brilliant. So we have a Barrett Abernethy, which is a Scottish surname, we've got to say.
That's right.
Not Italian, so Barrett Abernethy. He is a very, very experienced, over 3 decades data consultant. He is the founder of a really, really interesting business called Bronto Farm. And we met at the TVAI Hub, didn't we, Barrett? Which is something
we did, yes.
That GCS has been involved with quite a lot, and yourself has been involved with, and it's been a really, really great networking place to meet interesting people like you. I'm not going to call myself interesting, Barrett, but certainly interesting people. When we spoke before, we just talked about data, we talked about AI, and I felt this is the sort of thing that we should really get onto the podcast. So I know you wear quite a lot of hats, Barrett, but maybe you could just give us a background, a little bit of story about yourself as to how you come to be in this position and the different industries, and maybe how you've seen technology develop over the years up to where it is now.
Well, David, thanks for inviting me, and I enjoyed meeting you and speaking to you at the Thames Valley AI meetups, really, because it's a great place to just bounce ideas off people and talk to people and try and explain fairly complex topics in a easy to understand way. And I appreciate your time and listening to me for at length waffling on about some storage product. So I've been working. I started coding when I was about 9 years old, writing some games for my friends. One of the old ZX Spectrum, ZX81 people back in the day. And then I started getting into embedded electronics and various other things. I have a background in physics and math. Got into automotive manufacturing plants fairly early in my career. We won some design innovation awards for the company I started back then, or was involved with back then. And data acquisition from various motors and machinery in those plants. Back at that time, we had microcontrollers and we were struggling with the volume of data, but we managed to process it and save our customers a lot of money because at the time, and I don't know if it's still relevant, depending on the type of load you put back on the grid, you would be charged a penalty. Not just was the we're acquiring data, but we've got a good product fit there, and we had a return on investment, proof point for that particular customer. And then that then snowballed into various other data acquisition, high-speed data acquisition things at the time in those plants, doing materials analysis and various other things. And then I moved into the online gaming arena. And of course, that was huge amounts of data for auditing and regulatory compliance, but also just to get we didn't call it data science back then. We used to call it making money. So we could profile everything much like you do now, but we didn't really have a term for that. And we had cohorts and clustering and various other things. And even back then, and this is a while ago, you'd identify various trends in the data, various cohorts of people which you could target for various types of things that are more appealing to them. It's quite I don't want to stray too far off the topic, but it's a very fine line between manipulating people for bad things and then enhancing that user experience. And I think I've always tried to stay on the positive side of the data and not go down some of the stories you see are positively evil, really. And I think Google had a project some years ago where I think it was literally called Project X, where they determined that they could not only influence elections, they could influence climate change or anything they wanted to, because at that scale. So I always strayed away from that. But I've done lots of things with data over the years.
Do you think just on the online gaming side, because I'm always quite fascinated by the kind of the outliers that push forward technology, and I always think maybe kind of gaming, betting, or whatever. They talk about because there's kind of money to be made, and it's almost more unregulated. I know it's not unregulated now, but maybe a more unregulated and more so that people are prepared to take risks to move things forward. And potentially, I mean, just to, I'm not like trying to, but they always say like pornography has always got like really good technology ahead of everyone else because they kind of, they're not regulated and they try stuff,
Well,
I'm not trying to say it's like gambling is like, well, it kind of is in some ways, but they're all vices, aren't they? But,
they are. Yeah. So I did do regular casino games, but eventually moved into bingo. The bingo, you're not competing with the customer. It's still regulated. Because back then, we didn't have the AWS cloud and whatever. We had our own hosting facilities, but you could only host in licensed jurisdictions. And those hosting facilities are incredibly expensive. So there was a bit of evolutionary pressure there because you had to write highly efficient code. Really, every little ounce of performance mattered. Not only in our expenses, but if we could push through one extra game a day, that was a significant amount of money. When you add up with all the servers. But you're right. You have to innovate. There's a lot of money involved. So much money that we had I won't name the bank, we had direct links into one of the bank's central computers, essentially, multiple redundant links, because we moved that much money. So it's a huge, back then it certainly was a huge industry. We were regulated, we wanted to be regulated, not because it was law at the time, although it depended on the jurisdiction it was, but to get our little PW, actually I probably shouldn't mention the various names, but to get to the various auditing companies to get their logos on it, we would ship off huge amounts of data to them for analytics.
Yes,
I remember producing a 300-page report on our random number generator.
Wow.
Which was actually...
Wouldn't you love to have had Copilot back in those days, Barrett, to write that 300
Oh,
page?
I tell you what, yes, doing that by hand, my goodness. But we used essentially radioactive decay to generate random numbers, which you still get today. You get quantum random number generators, which you plug into the servers.
When we're seeing kind of a lot of investment going into things like AI, which we'll obviously come to talk about, I always think there's two, very different to the industry I'd mentioned earlier, but biotech and investment funds seem to be two key drivers as much as we can see within the industry in terms of these types of jobs. One in terms of paying people large sums of money, but also in terms of the amount of money they're putting into it. And again, going back to follow the money, if a biotech agency is able to produce a job a drug quicker and more efficiently, that's huge amounts of money. And if an investment trader is able to even get inches or milliseconds in terms of its investment patterns, again, that's huge amounts of money. And is that what you've seen? You know, the big investments go to the big profits.
Yeah, so actually those two use cases you mentioned there do have a lot of money behind them, but they're kind of different use cases there. So you've got the banking where it's highly performant code and data transfer, and you are limited by the speed of light. Physics does catch up with you eventually, but they will route the fiber in a more direct route, or possibly dig it through a mountain or what have you to get a slightly faster speed to the exchange. And there's been all sorts of innovation in some of the hardware devices that we have in those servers, that DPUs, which essentially offloads the data processing and receiving to an offloader thing. So it's much, much quicker. I haven't been in the banking area for quite a long time, but I'm sure the innovation has been substantial since I was involved. Biotech is interesting because you've got, with the genomic sequencing, you've got huge amounts of data. Funny enough, a lot of the techniques used in text processing was applicable to genomics. Of course, you've just got 4 letters in your alphabet. But likewise, some of the innovation from there is now applicable to text-based processing. But it is a huge amount of data. And processing at that scale is challenging. And then you touched on some, getting your drug out to market quicker. And also, once it's been released, you've got all sorts of regulatory approval. You've got to do real-world evidence and various other things. And then you've got to data mine essentially at population level through various data sets to look for incidents of maybe side effects of your drug or what have you. Now, I'm not an expert in that area, but I've done analysis for this and done the data gathering for it. And it does accelerate that drug process and drug design process. And there's a lot of innovation in that side of things, where we're going to be looking more towards tailored to you specifically type medications. But again, there's just a huge amount of data that has to be sucked in, analyzed, and used to come on that.
That's very interesting. And I guess the reason I'd bring that out is, if you kind of think about your career arc, as it were, you've worked with so many different kind of areas in terms of industries, sectors, that sort of thing. And I guess my next question is, you mentioned there 2 different kind of use cases in the way people use data in different kind of arenas, different sectors. But when you identify, when you work with new industries, when you move into new sectors, do you feel that the use of data, the way data is constructed, the way it moves about, do you feel you have to kind of almost learn the industry and then you can apply it? Or do you have certain kind of universal techniques? This is always the way, this is always the things I look for.
Oh, I think saying something's always the way you do it is dangerous.
Yeah.
I think you do have a sort of a quiver of techniques that you tend to reuse, and that may just be human nature. I think it's important to learn what your customer or that business or vertical is doing with the data. Especially lately, there seems to be a propensity for people to go, well, we want to collect all the data and we're going to make money from it. And they don't really have an idea what they actually want to do. So it does take a little while exploring that. And to your previous example with the drug design and this discovery, well, what do you actually want to do? Okay, well, we want to see if there's any evidence of side effects in the general population. Okay, well, that's a little bit of a different thing from checking a genomic sequencing. Maybe this is a bad example, but you would then look for specific side effects because they may have a known set that you can query. So now all of a sudden your problem space is just shrunk massively. So you can do it for less money and still provide a valuable outcome. If you had to just process in general, and people generally do know what they're looking for, but you've got to talk to them. Sit in the same room, examine their business, understand what they're doing. I think understanding someone's business is the most important thing, and then apply maybe not rigorously, but apply your common techniques to that. And you've got to be careful with that because technology is advancing so quickly. What you did last year is maybe not even valid anymore. or possibly still valid, but not the optimal solution.
And is that what you've seen? I mean, for myself, looking outside of this, and I would use the Copilot example, right? So we use Copilot within our business, and every time I log into Copilot, it seems to be able to do a new thing. Now, I know it's not the cutting edge of, data, but it does seem to be, it's either teaching itself how to do these things, or someone clever somewhere in Microsoft HQ is teaching how to do things. But it seems to be constantly progressing faster than I've seen technology advance, because it's kind of, I don't know. I mean, you could tell me, is it advancing itself? Are people doing this? Is it, the pace of technology for me seems to be accelerating at this moment in time. Is that yes or no, Barrett?
Yes, absolutely yes. It's overwhelming at times. As we in the preamble to this, we were talking about one of my consultancy businesses, which was doing extracting knowledge from text. Okay, and it was a pretty complex thing to do back in the day. I'd worked in a business that we exited from it and done quite well. Very, very difficult. That is essentially trivial now, right? To the extent that there is no more business for that part of the consultancy, and that's fine. That's a natural progression as technology advances. But the pace of advance is incredible, and a lot of people go, "Oh, well, this is like when the weaving industry started using automatic looms," but it's not really. And I can see the comparison, but it's more general. It's everything. It's not just, it's one small sector of manufacturing. It is everywhere and everything. And I'm constantly reevaluating the way I'm working. I found myself the other day writing some deployment scripts, and why am I doing this? Surely I should be asking the AI, and the AI did it perfectly. It's a case of understanding the art of the possible and questioning everything you do now. Do I need to do this? Where's my value? Because the AI can do this. The pace of change is incredible, and it is so broad spectrum. It's difficult to know where it all ends up. To your point about the actual AI, they are advancing. And I suspect there are actually behind the scenes, and not really a conspiracy theory, more advanced than we realize. And I think that's evidenced why, maybe OpenAI comes up with a new model. Same day, next day, Gemini comes up with one. Matches it. 2 days later, one of the Chinese companies comes up with an open source model that's slightly better. And you can't honestly tell me they didn't really have those in the back pocket. So it's almost like a case, especially maybe with the Chinese side of things, they just keeping it slightly in line. And we're going well off topic, but I think having the chip embargo has actually, it's applied evolutionary pressure on maybe China to be more efficient, new techniques. And I think NVIDIA got lucky. Now, they got very lucky. Some years ago, a bunch of people worked out the graphics processor really good at doing matrix math. And this is before the days of CUDA came along, and we're doing essentially various types of matrix manipulations and early stage machine learning with these things. NVIDIA very cleverly went, "Oh, we'll make a language for that." And then very cleverly started giving that away to people like myself. They gave me all sorts of cards and things, and educational institutes, and it's just snowballed from there. But is it the only way to do these calculations? And the answer is actually no. There are different technologies. There's some memristors. There's spiking neural networks, although you possibly still use GPUs for them. But there's other techniques out there. And the problem I see is actually when you saw when DeepSeek released their model, and you saw the stock prices drop, because people are buying these machines on credit, essentially expecting them to pay off in 9, 10, 12 months. If there is a substantial change to the way these things train and inference, well, the market will collapse really, really quickly.
So they have to really control the releases and control how things move forward. In maybe the same way as Apple do the iPhone to kind of keep us interested, but not quite there yet.
So I went to a fireside chat with OpenAI, and Sam Altman was involved, organized by UCL. When I say fireside chat for maybe 100 or 200 people. Don't get the impression it was just me and two other people.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time,
was there a fireside though, Barrett?
There was, in fact, no fireside, but there was a few chairs and a coffee table.
Yeah.
And at the time, he said, well, I think he said we're going to release a new model every year and a half. And that's just not been the case. I think that was back with, version 3. They've just accelerated. They've had to accelerate because of all the competition out there. It's great for us as users, end users. However, now we use AI extensively, and I've got a couple of tips and techniques I can possibly share. But the increasing the model capabilities has been fantastic, and I don't know where it's going to go. But in the last generation, I think it's been improving, but not as much of an improvement as I would have anticipated. And now my buying decision is actually different. It's all these guys are roughly the same. What's making my purchasing decision? And it's actually how well they're integrating with my tooling. How good is their billing? How stable are they? More like an enterprise. And some of them do not behave like enterprise software vendors, and others are very, very good at it. And those are the ones I'm giving my money to.
That's great. It's interesting. So let's to kind of take it back to the career arc again. As a leader, if I kind of look over your career, you've increasingly, and I know that the business that you're working with at the moment is kind of very much yourself plus a range of different technologies. So I guess there's obviously the development of technology, and that's fast paced, but there's also the development of how you as a leader interact with that. So how have you seen your leadership style and the type of team that you're running, that sort of thing? How has that changed over the years as technologies become more powerful? Because I think a lot of people are dealing with that at the moment.
Well, yes. Funny enough, so a lot of these techniques you've developed in managing people and engineers actually apply to the agents, and possibly more so. It used to be a case because technology advanced, but it was fairly slow, and you'd get very skilled people in your team who knew their subject matter inside and outside, and you could rely on them to make solid decisions going forwards, and you knew what those decisions should be. As a leader, you had a feeling what we needed to do to get the product out the door. Things have changed dramatically because technologies move so quickly. So you don't really have that subject matter expert on the team. Well, you may have, but he's still learning and things are changing. And this is actually something that bothers me about modern software. It changes so quickly and they break things. The code rot is real. Code rot back in the C++ or C days. Yes, it would happen, but not like it does now. Now you look at your code that worked perfectly 6 months ago won't compile now because there's some weird dependency that they've under the covers has changed or what have you. And I know you can fix your dependencies, but it's that this pace is insane and things are breaking all the time. And keeping on top of that is really challenging. So when I do make decisions, I get everybody involved in the team to, much like you used to see in Star Trek, where they go into their room and everyone throws out ideas and you gather all that information. But ultimately, I think I have to use my experience to make that final decision on the path we go. And I've got to own that. I've got to be very confident in that decision. Because what happens in the teams is if a couple of people have put forward, and sometimes very vocally, what they think should happen or which way we go, if you don't make that very confident decision, it can increase friction in the team. You need to, address all those concerns and that is my decision. This is the way we're going, and no one's being blamed for what they put forward. I've made that decision. because it can breed a bit of friction in the team if someone's going, well, why didn't they take my view? The other thing is every single decision now needs to be documented with reasons why we've made it. And we need to revisit those decisions every few months because things are changing so quickly. So a proposal or tech stack or whatever that we reject now, we may not reject next month.
And is that just, sorry to cut in there, Barrett, is that something, I've heard many of these Leaders Series conversations, and this is really interesting. But what you just said there is almost as if that's a new thing. Like, I'm sure you would have documented in the past, but it sounds like now we really do need to document it all the time to kind of remember where we were.
Yes, we always used to, and you'd occasionally revisit it. But now you revisit that a lot. And detailing your decision-making process is important. So it's because there may have been a very small reason why you didn't select that particular technology. And because the rest of the ecosystem has changed all of a sudden, it's very valid. So yeah, you used to document it, but now you document and revisit often.
And then one of the things we've also talked about now is obviously, almost like you mentioned it a bit there, is your move from being a kind of a leader of maybe global teams of like 40, 50, maybe more people, to like a position where maybe you're either advising companies or running companies yourself, where it's maybe you and maybe another plus a number of agents. And for people that, I'm sure there's people here and listening to this, I've got kind of two. What is your, you mentioned there like how to deal with the agents and how they're slightly different, but what would you say the pros and cons are of that? You know, and obviously you must see the pros because that's something you've developed and integrated into your own business and are working with other businesses to do. So, you know, what do you see the benefits of that being, and how do you best get those benefits out of that team, virtual team, if you want?
Wow. Okay. That's quite a large question.
Yeah.
So let me preface that first by saying we do at least 80% of the coding now is used done by the agents. And I've got a number of observations about that. So I think first off, they are very much like junior to mid-level engineers, and I think they are getting better. The latest round of agents, based on maybe Claude Opus 4.5 and some of the news from Google, is more like a mid-level engineer. So some years ago, I worked with a very talented, very, very talented senior engineer, and he had two sayings: never believe anything anyone tells you, and untested code is broken code. And never has that been more applicable, because these agents will gaslight you, they'll lie to you, they'll tell you all sorts of things. They won't test properly, even though you ask them to write the test cases. And I've got a couple of stories about that. I recently asked it to generate test cases for a certain thing, put performance metrics, which there's no ways they should be the same at every run. And it generated them, ran them, and generated a beautiful layout of performance metrics. Ran it again, exactly the same numbers. Checked the code, and hard-coded in there a nice matrix with all the numbers pre-filled in. So if it's not running a test at all, it just worked out what the output needed to look like and regurgitated that. And I've had quite a few examples where, much like that, you're dealing with an engineer, you go, well, that seems a bit slow. And it goes, network latency. And you go, well, it's running on the same machine. How can that be? And my definition of AGI, when it comes along, is it takes it to the next level and blames DNS. And then I think we're complete. But it is difficult to manage them. I actually find it's more of a cognitive load managing the team of agents than it is a team of people. Because you've got to monitor what all of them are doing. It has accelerated work, but it is also hard to manage, especially along with the testing. And the testing side of things, they will often give up. They'll write incomplete tests. The tests are just wrong. And that you may have heard of test-driven development, and I think that's becoming more and more important. So come up with what you want your product to look like, and then get the agents to write tests, and get a couple of them to do it, and cross-check each other's work, and then you check that work. If you get the test right, and you get the actual product description right, and the design document right, you will do very well with the agents. If you get either of those wrong, it's going to go horribly wrong. And you do need to watch what they're doing, because they will just go off on a tangent if you're not careful. I'm going to say the new ones tend to stay on focus a lot better. I've had one recently running for an hour and a half, and it stayed on focus the entire time.
That's brilliant. Yeah, we are talking about them like we're anthropomorphizing them, aren't we? Do you give them names, Barrett? Are they John and?
I try not to, because if I do that, then I will start to think they are more intelligent than they are, rather than essentially probabilistic engines. They are very powerful tools, but you've got to understand their limitations. And I found that I really got to be careful with letting, much like with real engineers, you've got to be careful with them, unless you've got an in-house code style, letting different agents work on the same code base. I haven't tested it recently, but in the previous generation of models, that went incredibly badly. I think they've all got their own internal representations of what, in the vector space, what that code would look like. And they sort of just mess it up really, really badly in a variety of ways. Whereas if you just stick with the one agent for the actual code writing, maybe not for the test, but that agent for the code writing, stick to a single one, you get a much better result.
So I see you very much, Barrett, as a pioneer. When you're talking about these things, it's almost like it's almost good to put this on a podcast, right? Because it's almost like you're trialing things, making things work, so that maybe others could learn, or definitely you could learn, but maybe others could learn from trials and tribulations. Is that how you see it? You're kind of a pioneer more than a leader.
Possibly. I do. I'm really bad at posting on any social media. I do the odd LinkedIn post, but actually, my tales from the trenches, as it were, where things have gone horribly wrong, so people can learn and potentially avoid those pitfalls. It is these new things are incredibly powerful tools, but you've got to use them in the right way. And the problem is that definition of the right way is evolving continually as the new models come out and new techniques. And, for example, prompt engineering was this big thing about a year or 2 years ago. As far as I'm concerned, it's no longer relevant. Or you can get them to write their own prompts, because there's all of the big providers now provide things that will write the prompts for you. So just in that regard, that's changed. It's a constant evolution, constant querying. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? Do I need to do it this way? And whereas that used to happen maybe over years and the old times before AI, that's now continually, weekly, possibly even daily. Question what you're doing all the time.
So where do you, if you think about the long-term vision for where you want to get to, where you mentioned there before, but if we get to AGI, it would have a different excuse. But where will you be happy to get it to?
Wow, I have to think about that a bit. A little bit better than it is now, and I'd be happy. Now, how do I define a little bit better? I think, so I'm particularly talking about code generation. I think something more along the lines of what a senior engineer would do, more questioning, more ability to adapt. And I do find they get a little bit rigid. So we've got at Bronto Farm some very custom data structures. You can point the AI at it, and it will describe what that algorithm does perfectly. And it will say it does whatever, and it will say at the bottom it goes, well, this looks like a research level algorithm, or published by a paper or something. And it fully understands what the purpose is. And then you say, well, please use this in some other code. And immediately you'll forget about it and go based on something it's trained on before. Or if not immediately, very shortly thereafter. Because it has a sort of a bias to its training set. Whereas a senior engineer would have gone, oh, that looks interesting. I'm going to use that going forward. So I think that more, I don't know how that would be done, because it's sort of like training and reinforcement learning on the fly. But when it gets to that stage, I think I'd be quite happy with that. So it's assimilating. Now they do somewhat, because I can save context into local memory and what have you, and it does sort of learn, but it does have a propensity just to go back to what it's seen before, what it's seen in its training set. Once we get over that, I think it'll get really interesting. Now, in some of the research papers and mathematical things, they claim it does this. I'm not sure. I'm not in that field, but if what I see in the coding arena applies there, I would be somewhat skeptical. But then again, DeepMind with their protein folding, Nobel Prize, obviously there's something in it.
And when you therefore think about kind of achieving those goals, the other thing I think about is what you've talked about there is you being the leader, and you having the ideas, and then they're carrying out the task to help you achieve your ideas. I guess you would kind of come to a point where, if you're thinking about virtual teams and teams you're working with in a agentic way, do you ever see them coming back to you with ideas? Couldn't we do this?
Yes, absolutely. So I already use it in that way. So there's some things when we're exploring a new thing. It used to be a case of you'd Google search for something, but you'd have to know roughly what to Google search for. And I don't know all the latest techniques and things. The AI is really, really good for that. You come out like, I want to do this. Here's a couple of ideas. What do you think? Let's explore. And exploring that really, maybe not really solve space, but that knowledge, that corpus of knowledge that it knows about. Because there may be some mathematical technique I'm not aware of, so I haven't even considered Google searching for it. It is wonderful for that. It really helps to explore things now. I do a little bit of, for fun, I do some ray tracing, and I've done that for years. Whereas before, I'd explore new mathematical techniques. I'd have to write the code, work out the maths, write the code, get a rendering, possibly wrong. I can now iterate with the AI really, really quickly. I explain what I'm trying to do, some mathematical concepts. Let's validate it. It'll write some MATLAB plot code for me, and I've got a rendering. Okay, well, we're going to tweak that. We're going to change that. What happens when we try this? And it does it. And that iterative process is where it would take me weeks and weeks and weeks. I can do it in an afternoon. So it's very exciting that way.
It helps to progress businesses forward and that sort of thing. So I think
it does.
I think where I'm kind of getting to with this question is, obviously, when you're working as a consultant and when you're thinking about data within businesses, for myself, maybe as a leader of a recruitment business, how would you advise that and we are doing it a bit within our group in terms of different types of AI searches, et cetera, and we've got some quite interesting things, but how would you advise people, and obviously that is part of what you do, Barrett, one of the big things what you do, how should they look at their businesses, and how do they take those first steps towards having that long-term vision to have a more AI automated business?
So that's an interesting one, because you've said there, how do I take my first steps, and then how do I have a long-term vision? And I see people getting this badly wrong, because they go, well, what happens if I bolt on a bit of AI here? And yes, it may provide some value. Genuinely, it costs more to run than it provides. And I see this quite often. People think they need AI and they've got a cool little feature which they bolt on, very often struggle to deliver it, and it has a minimal value to the customer. You've got to change that mindset from, rather than bolting it on in the periphery, how can I make AI the central point of my business? What can I do to enable my business from that central perspective of AI? Right, and then maybe you bolt on other things around it, rather than the other way around. So, and I'm going to make this up because I do not fully understand your business, but let's say that you've got a contract with one of your customers, and they want to form a new team of maybe some data scientists, some data engineers, whatever. You've got a contract. You make that the heart. The AI now understands the contract. And I'm sure you've got various things that rights and obligations and things that you need to fulfill. Using that, it can drive the rest of the business. It goes, oh, well, we need to find 4 data scientists, but we need to find complementary skills because it has a better understanding of maybe what the business, and there's other documentation you've thrown in there. It can then work out what is the best fit, and it can start going out to the market and find out what candidates you've got in your database. Come up with a more holistic view rather than, and I don't know how you currently work it, an AI search looking for a single candidate based on what one of your consultants has typed in. So, the contract, project brief, and then you can then involve that in the billing cycle and various other things. When you've certain trigger points are met, it automatically goes up and things like that have existed for years in the contract lifecycle management phase. But now you've got the AI more intelligent. It can query your financial systems. You've got model context protocol that enables it to talk to various other things. So putting it in the center of your business, it becoming more, I think it'll become more critical. It drives real value. And you can then have more traditional systems that it can communicate with finance systems or whatever, rather than the other way around, where you've got your standard systems, a little bolt-on of AI around the edge. And I really believe that's the way it should go and will go in the future.
Yeah, so identifying those key things and then building those key things to help you grow and build your business. One of I think my chairman said to me is, if we've got all these automations, does that mean we just do less hours? He obviously doesn't agree with that. I probably don't either. Or we can do double the work, and obviously recruitment and sales is a very much a KPI driven, like how many CVs did you send, how many interviews did you arrange, how many calls did you make? So if I think I can do X in a week, me plus my agents, or probably you plus your agents, could do double or triple.
Yeah, easily more than double. But there is definitely a higher cognitive load. So rather than having maybe a team of engineers and maybe 4 or 5 of them will ask me a question a day or every few hours, now I have multiple agents essentially asking me questions continually. It's like a chess, I'm not a chess player, but a chess grandmaster playing multiple chess games simultaneously on the screen. Whereas before you used to have maybe 1 or 2 people and a couple of queries, maybe a custom query. You've got this all flooding in, and you've got to make the right decision to keep this agent happy and this agent happy, and keep their workflow going. It is harder, much, much harder. And some of my customers and connections in industry have actually found that their junior and mid-level engineers are struggling to do this, and they're requiring senior engineer to guide the agents because they're more used to making that type of decision and understanding the implications of their decisions.
And is that, I mean, that could be like, they talk about new jobs, is new conditions coming, AI overload. Like, I can't take the amount of information or how great this thing is, and it's blowing my brain up.
Well, I think there's an element to that, but then you've got to ask yourself, hang on a second, what aren't I automating here? Why don't I have an agent or a system that's looking after the agents that look after my infrastructure? That is maybe more of an overseeing agent, and you've got another one writing the code. You just got to constantly question what you're doing here. Now, agent get it wrong. So do you want to do that? Well, maybe not. Maybe you do not want a human oversight on that part. But there's certainly parts of it that you can just then redelegate. It becomes this nice pyramid or tree of things. Oh, hang on. What am I doing here? Why am I struggling with this? Well, maybe I dedicate that to another agent. But now you need something to orchestrate all those agents. So what do? Well, you make another one, doing the orchestration. But you do need to be careful. At the current state of technology, you need to watch them carefully. And I suspect if you had an overarching agent looking after everything, if that started going wrong, things are going to go horribly wrong really quickly.
You kind of need to be the overarching agent. And just, I mean, as we're on this talking technology, are there particular tools that you use that allow you to deal with the agents themselves? Can you give a shout out to any particular ones that you find useful?
So tend to use some custom ones actually, which we've been thinking of making in a product. But the problem with that, it's iterating so quickly. We're struggling to keep up with our own internal tooling, let alone release it as a product to the market. You can now, with the modern ones, like Claude allows you to make sub-agents and various other things, and I can't remember what they call them, various other things that have skills, which you can pre-set up, and that does work quite well. And I think I mean, as you can tell, I'm probably all in on Anthropic. I do use Google as well, but you get used to a certain set of tooling. They provide everything I need at the moment, but that's constantly under reevaluation. But you can make various other things checking each other. And we do have some internal tooling to help orchestrate all that, especially when we're looking at testing. So testing is very key, and don't trust a single agent to do it all. So write your test with one, have another one validate that, check the test case, come up with more test case. And like I said before, get the testing solid. And then you can be relatively confident. But I actually, something that leads on from that, last week, now this is not I'm not disparaging or being, I'm not saying that they don't provide great tools, but we, actually I'm probably not going to mention them, we cancelled our subscription to our integrated development environments, or professional tooling, because we no longer write code at all in those terminals and that thing, because we've got another agent that actually runs in. It's got SSI access to one of the test servers that deploys everything and tests for us. We don't need that. Now I'm writing, deploying to a Docker or whatever. I'm no longer debugging the code. What we do need is a Markdown viewer, because the models like to write Markdown, and a code viewer where we can just do a sort of a code review. And that's it. So there's no need for that in our ecosystem anymore. And I think whilst not a huge saving, it definitely, you question everything you're doing, and you go, well, do I need that anymore? Do I need that tooling anymore? What am I doing here?
Yeah, we as we integrate AI tools into our business, there are other pieces of software that we spend quite a lot of money on. When you start to think to yourself, do I need this? And then I guess, and then it comes back to the leadership element, like you mentioned there before, like making these decisions, making strong decisions. At some point, you have to be the person making the decisions. But I guess as you're going on this path, that there's going to be some quite strong decisions where people are going to find it difficult to understand, and also to kind of question, what does this mean for me? Me, myself, what happens here for me? How do you see those conversations going? What's your advice for dealing with that?
Yeah,
or how?
Yeah, make a safe space. Encourage people, because once they start playing with it and see that you trust them to use it. Now, I've got to be a little bit careful there, because you can't just be throwing customer data at these things, because it's going out to the cloud, and in your line of business there's probably sensitive stuff you don't want to go in there, but you can host your own models or whatever. Encourage your staff to use it. If things go wrong, don't get upset. In fact, actually, I love failure, because as long as you're learning from it and you're documenting it, your organization as a whole is going to grow faster than someone having the odd bit of success and we just stick to that one successful thing. No, keep on failing, because you're gonna, that's how evolution works, right? Lots of failures, a couple of successes, and then building the successes and more failures. But you're going to make that safe space. And if something goes wrong and someone accidentally spends too much money, well, not ideal, but it's okay, because we're all learning.
I think
you really got to make that. It's very important to. I can't stress this enough. Make that people feel very safe in the use of the tools. A lot of people won't tell you they've used an AI tool for something, and you really got to encourage them. I don't mind if you've written. In fact, it's a positive if you've written everything with the I don't know, OpenAI or whatever. As long as you've then checked it and critiqued it and used your. But it's fine. Please let me know, because it's fantastic. If you're telling me you've done 10 times the work in half an hour, well, that's a positive, isn't it?
100%. And I thought it's quite a funny thing. Well, we always think of a strap line for our podcasts, and as you say, I think you said love failure and keep failing. So I was thinking that would be a good strap line for the podcast. But then I thought, no, that would be a really bad strap line for the podcast, because really love failure is not the best title for a Leaders Series podcast for yourself, Barrett.
No, especially when our primary focus, or my primary focus, is on data storage, because we can't fail at that, and that's why testing is so important to me, because we cannot fail. We cannot even fail once, because it's people's data. It has to be perfect first time, and that's what is a little bit different from other aspects where you're just iterating fast and you've got a SaaS business and you're iterating quick. When you get to the fundamental storage layers, you've got to be super, super careful.
Brilliant. So my final question, it's obviously where you're navigating a very fast-paced and fast-moving kind of environment, and sound like I'm going to say you're owning it at the moment, Barrett, as a pioneer. So this is
thank you. Thank you, but it does not feel like that every day. It feels overwhelming at times. In fact, most of the time.
And I think that if I keep using my pioneer analogy, I'm sure many pioneers did, right? But that's why it's important to kind of get this on a podcast so people can learn. But what's next for you? What we're at the end of 2025. So what's big for 2026 in the world of Barrett and Bronto Farm and the data consultancies?
Yeah. So this might sound counterintuitive, but so yes, we use AI and agentic AI to do a large number of things. We've recently just allowed it to administer one of the servers in the cluster, very, very cautiously, because, it could do something horribly wrong. But it's doing very, very well. In fact, it analyzed some log files, worked out a potential problem, and applied a fix. Fantastic. All in the space of, I think, about 10 or 15 minutes. What we're looking at is really how can we come up with technology that's as unopinionated as possible, which has the greatest applicability to the changing technology landscape in terms of agents and people. What can we supply? Stripping away, and it's actually quite difficult to do when you've got a product and you just keep on stripping away layers. What do we actually need here? We don't need that stuff. And you end up with a much smaller set, potentially much more robust, more useful product. We got to that point. But how do we sell that, and so we've recently taken some advice to work out the best way of structuring that. But it's quite difficult, it's quite scary, because you've taken away a lot of the stuff people expect. You're coming up with a new paradigm, and they always say never be the first, never do the education play, never try and educate the market, maybe be the second or third player. But technology is moving so quickly, and some of the stuff we've come up with actually has greater applicability to a lot of things, especially the agents, especially the AI, where it can very quickly use our underlying technology because it's so simple, it just understands it. And we've done lots of experiments with it, and it just gets it. Some of the stuff we've got it to come up with in the space of 15, 20 minutes would take engineers weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's purely because we've made such a simple set of primitives. It just works, and it works reliably. So getting very excited about that, not quite there to release yet, and really starting to look at some of the equivalent in the compute area rather than, pods and containers and all sorts of things. How can we make something that is robust, reliable, reproducible, all those things that the AIs can use effectively? But that's further down the road. But the word Bronto Farm, the word farm is that we idea is we're going to provide a lot of this underlying architectural, structural, essentially the land people can then put their workloads on, put their storage on, and do it in any way they want, because those primitives are there.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you, firstly, I wish you a happy Christmas, Barrett, and a happy New Year.
And to you.
But also wish you kind of, good luck in those ventures. I know that, this is something that we talk about in all the podcasts at the moment, but I think getting that real insight into the depths of it has been really, really useful for me, and I'm sure it will be for our listeners. So thank you very much for today, and good luck with all your endeavors in 2026.
Well, thank you, David, for letting me get some of my opinions out there.
That's right. Very good. Fantastic. For posterity, I think. So yeah, thank you very much, Barrett. Cheers.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.